Now we've already looked at concatenation, but in this part we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look just to understand the different ways that we can do this, just to tidy things up a little bit. It's really important to get this right first. So let's say we have, again, a very simple variable. Let's just call this weather, and we're going to set this to sunny. Now, to display this to use it in a sentence, your first instinct might be to echo out a string. So for example, the current weather is, and then go ahead and add a space in, and then go and echo out the variable underneath. There's not necessarily anything wrong with this, but in terms of looking at the code, it's a little bit messy and a little bit unnecessary. So you can see here that because of the way that HTML works, this is just text and it's just been brought up to the next line, including that space. So that is the very basics of how we may do that. Now, of course, we want to concatenate now rather than echo out on different lines. And we've already seen earlier on that we can use a dot to go ahead and do this. So let's go ahead and concatenate on using a dot, keeping that space in there, and you can see we get exactly the same result. Okay, so let's throw another variable in here, and then we'll assign this to a new string. So let's say we have a status variable here, and we're going to say the current weather is X, and it's, and remember, because we now have a single quote in there, we just need to escape that. We're going to say X degrees. So we're going to add in a temperature just here as well. So up here, let's just go ahead and say degrees, and we're going to set this to say 30. Okay, so now we can replace these in. Now what I tend to do when I'm writing out a string like this, I write out exactly what I want to write. I go ahead and get rid of, say, an X or whatever I've put in there. I have two single quotes in here. I add two dots in, and we now have concatenation. The first string, a dot, whatever we want to concatenate, a second dot, and then the last part of the string. Now in this case, we would say weather, and then for the degrees, again, we would do a similar thing. Get rid of the X and put two dots in there, like so, and then go ahead and output the degrees. Now we have a string in there. We're not outputting it at the moment, but we can very easily go ahead and now echo out that built up string using concatenation. The current weather is sunny and it's 30 degrees. Now, we've already seen this, but notice we are concatenating an integer here. This would work the same if we had a float. So let's say it was 30.5 degrees. PHP will realize that you're trying to get the string value of an integer when you're trying to output it, and it will just output it as normal as part of this. And we can kind of prove this by doing a var dump on the status that we have here. What you would expect to see here is just one value, and that's exactly what we do have. This is now built up a string, and we have one simple variable type. It's been converted over to a string. Now, if you are building up a string with a lot of variables in this case we're using 2, so it's not too bad, but the dot notation here can start to get a little bit messy, and there's an alternative that we can use to go ahead and do this. Now, technically this isn't concatenation. We're going to look at something called variable parsing. So to start, let's look at how this wouldn't work. Let's go and replace these concatenated variables over with $sign inside of this string and weather, and let's see what happens. So let's get rid of the degrees as well, and again replace this in with the variable name $degrees. So let's just fix that up. Okay, so let's take a look, and you can see if we again go and echo this, remember we can do this inside of here, or we can go and echo it separately just down here. And let's have a look. So the current weather is $weather, and it's $degrees. Of course, this doesn't make sense. We can see that the variables here are taken as literal strings. And to change that, we simply use double quotes rather than single quotes. And PHP will parse anything it sees within a $sign or with a $sign and actually inject this variable into the string. So let's go ahead and replace these with double quotes. We know that now we can get rid of this single quote escape because it will just work. Let's take a look at how this has looked. So there we go, sunny and 30.5. So it works in exactly the same way. And this is called variable parsing. Now I'm sure you'll agree this is much neater and it's a lot easier to manage. If we need to add anything else in, there's no concatenation. We just add the variable name into there. And remember earlier we spoke about using either single or double quotes for strings and generally sticking to one. But in the case of doing this, again, like I said before, you can break the rules and it's just makes things a lot easier to read, a lot easier to write, and a lot easier to maintain if you needed to update this at any time. So sometimes you might see the following syntax. Let's go ahead and wrap these in curly braces and see what happens when we go ahead and output these. And there we go. There we go. We have curly braces around this and you can see we get exactly the same result. So if you do see this at all, why would you do this? Well, when we don't use curly braces like this, PHP doesn't know when the variable name starts and when the variable name ends. If, for example, we wanted to include a degrees symbol in here, so for example, if I were to get rid of this, let's get rid of these two, and go ahead and place a degrees symbol just at the end of there, what's going to happen now? Well, let's go ahead and refresh, and you can see undefined variable, degrees, and then the degrees symbol. So clearly what's happening here is when we are placing a variable directly within double quotes, it's finding this one, so this is absolutely fine, and it's then looking for something with the variable name of degrees, and then because we have no space here, it's going ahead and looking for degrees and then the degree symbol. If we were to place a space here, it works. However, we want the space gone and we want the symbol right next to degrees. So, like I said, we wrap these in curly braces like that, and this means that PHP will say, oh, you want to end this variable name just here, and then there's no space in between here, so I'm just going to output this directly after it. And you can see here we have 30.5 degrees with the degrees right next to it. So this allows not only this to be more readable, but also very, very flexible now. We can include things here without having to add in lots of different concatenated strings. So lastly, I just want to cover something you may see from time to time, which isn't really concatenation, but it works pretty much like it. So we've already seen throughout the series when we're echoing things out, we can use a comma to separate what we want to output. So for example, I can say here, my name is, using a comma, I can go ahead and output some kind of variable, or in actual fact, I could just literally place the string in here. So you can see that this works. So let's go ahead and add this into a variable, and then we'll talk about what's happening here. So name equals, or we're assigning the value Alex to name, like so, and then it works in exactly the same way. So using a comma here only works with echo, and it's basically a way to chain on many strings, integers, floats to build up a string as you're echoing it out. So this is only part of echo, so it's not going to work if you were assigning this to a variable. If you were to say something like text equals my name is comma name, it's not going to work. You can see we get a syntax error and an unexpected comma on line 5, so we're not expecting this. In actual fact, what we are expecting is a dot, and then of course that would go ahead and work as normal. Now, generally when you're outputting concatenated strings, it's best to stick with this dot notation just so you don't get into trouble. If we were to revert this back to echo my name is and then name with a dot there, you can see that works in exactly the same way. So it's good practice to get into the state where you're using dots, never commas, just in case you mess things up when you go ahead and try and assign this to a variable. We've all been there. And remember, if things start to get complicated, put everything inside of double quotes and then go ahead and use them curly braces if you need to add characters onto variables. So you'll find concatenation everywhere in applications, and now you know a few ways to do this as well as what to look out for when you're writing code like this yourself.